I was hoping I would grow. I did crazy things like hang upside down, from a pull-up bar. All right. Well, my name is Angie Suplisson, and I am an aeronautical engineer. So I joined the Air Force when I was 17. I went to the Air Force Academy here in Colorado Springs. I'm living here, retired here in Colorado Springs as well. And I graduated in the class of 1991 there. And then I was an aeronautical engineer for my career field. And I spent 28 years after graduation in the Air Force. So I actually just retired in 2019, 2 years ago. And as part of my career field as an aeronautical engineer, I've done many things. Primarily, I did flight test, where basically I was at primarily three different bases in the United States: Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, where we test weapons systems. And then I was at Edwards Air Force Base in California, which is where test pilot school is. It's like where Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. And we continue to every fighter and bomber since World War II has been tested there. It's a pretty magical place in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It's also where I met Candace and Dan Levin, which is how I know you guys and had a chance to work with them. And I was also at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, where we tested bunker buster weapons and also ejection seats to help save men and women, air crew who would have to eject. So mostly I did flight tests. That was my career field. I'm actually called a flight test engineer because when you go to test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base in California, it's a 11-month school, so essentially almost a year. And half of the students are pilots, and they could be fighter, bomber, tanker, now even RPA, the drone pilots go through there. Half are pilots and half are engineers or navigators, folks who would sit in the back seat, if you will. And that way we have, the way I explain test pilot school is, you have pilots and they're already engineers, but they learn how to, speak more technically about flight testing in the aircraft. And then the engineers, who normally our job is on the ground, we learn, the aviation speak, and we actually fly in the aircraft and test it with them. And so that part of my job is really neat because we get the airplanes before they go operational, before they go to the user. And the second part of my career field that I really spent a lot of time on is being a teacher. So I was an instructor at the United States Air Force Academy. I taught aeronautical engineering, and I also was the department head of the aeronautical engineering department. I was the department head for 1 year, and overall I taught there for 4.5 years. So I got to teach some amazing cadets. I also got to do a neat program in the Air Force where I studied political science overseas in France. But hopefully that'll come up a little bit later as well. Not related to aeronautical engineering, but just a fantastic opportunity. And I'm married to Fabrice, who I met in France, which is why that's the good story. And we've been married for 17 years, and we have 2 boys named Joseph, who's 16, and Mark, who is about to be 15 on November 20th. So Joseph's a junior and Mark is a freshman in high school. All right, so I chose to major in aeronautical engineering at the United States Air Force Academy. And I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I think, well, actually, this is funny. You, as young ladies who are considering professional careers, you'll appreciate this. I was really good at math in high school and growing up, and I knew I wanted to do something with numbers, with math. And I didn't know what. I really didn't know what. And back then in high school, we had counselors like you do, but like to help us determine what job we should be, we had this little questionnaire, that we filled out. And I can't remember if it was if it was in my junior year or the beginning of my senior year, but I remember filling this out, very similar to things you would do today, except it was, on paper. And I I got the results back, like to show me what career fields I'd be good for. And they suggested two that stick out in my mind. There might have been a couple more, but the two that stick out in my mind were teacher and public accountant, like a CPA, certified public accountant. And I thought, well, that's a very limited, set of choices. And I actually did end up being a teacher, an instructor at the academy, but I was like, and I'm sure back then, they probably took into the account that you were female, right? Like if a boy took the test and had the same answers, maybe they would have given him engineer, would have been one that popped out, but engineer didn't pop out on my list, right? But I knew I wanted to do something technical. I knew I wanted to do something with math, and my dad was in the Air Force, and I loved airplanes, through his love of the Air Force and, being stationed in Germany and Italy and all different places. So I knew I loved it. And it was my freshman year at the academy when they have career fairs and majors nights and things like that, when I met some, just very amazing instructors that were super motivational, great mentors of mine. And I realized that the best career field for me would be aeronautical engineering, so I could focus on designing airplanes, designing flight control systems, engines, propulsion, and ultimately, flight test. Well, once I was an aeronautical engineering major, I did, have an option at the academy to go become a pilot or obviously become an engineer like I did. Back then, I graduated in 1991. We had about 100 people about 1,000 people in my class. I think we graduated with 980 people, and everybody who was medically qualified got to go be pilots. And so I think 780 or 750 out of my class, about 75 or 78% of my class went to pilot training, but I was too short. So I was one of the ones that wasn't physically qualified because the height requirement back then was 5'4", and I was 5'2.5". I'm very proud of that extra half, but I was 5'2.5", and I knew I wasn't tall enough. Arriving there, it wasn't like a big surprise. Some of my friends weren't able to go because they had vision issues. You had to be 20/70 back then for vision, and they might be 20/100 or 20/200, and they didn't get to go. But for me, height was an issue. There was obviously other reasons that you could be, medically or physically disqualified. But I was hoping I would grow. I did crazy things like hang upside down, from a pull-up bar. I took an amino acid called tryptophan, which is supposed to, stimulate your growth, just like a natural amino acid. But I didn't grow anymore. I was the same height I was when I got there. So when I was a senior, actually, when I was a junior, I had a wonderful teacher named Dr. Tom Yeckout. And actually, he was Lieutenant Colonel Tom Yeckout at the time, and he taught my flight controls course. And he was a flight test engineer in the Air Force when he was younger. Of course, he was a professor at the academy at the time. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I do what you did? Because basically, you're not the pilot and you don't have a combat role, but you get to fly in the back of an F-16 or the back of a T-38 or in a C-130 or in a C-17 in a tanker to flight test these aircraft. And I was like, well, if I can't be an Air Force pilot, I want to fly as an engineer. And that's what a flight test engineer does. And he would tell us stories. He was one of the first flight test engineers on the A-10 attack aircraft. And he would just tell us the coolest stories. And I was like, wow, that's really making an impact, and it's exciting. It's got an, a very operational flavor, and it gets me in the air. I really, wanted to be in the air. So he wrote me, a letter of recommendation. And I think spring break of my senior year, I think it might've been spring break of my junior year, but I lived in Las Vegas. So when I was home actually, it might've been Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving or spring break, I drove 3.5 hours to Edwards and met a real, captain flight test engineer at Edwards, and got to see what he did in the control room. And then he told me about what it was like flying. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So when it was graduation time and we could pick our career fields, I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, but I knew that I had to have, 2 or 3 years experience under my belt before I could apply to test pilot school, to actually go to this, test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base. And I got in. Thankfully, it was a blessing, and I've been blessed to do that for the majority of my career. Okay, well, obviously you heard me get kind of excited about flying. I was very excited to be able to fly. At test pilot school, we fly about 25 to 27 aircraft during that year alone. And then you go off, to your job and test other things. So flying was really neat. We got to fly in P-51 Mustangs. We got to fly in the Goodyear blimp. We got to fly in the B-1 bomber, the F-111, F-16s, F-15s, T-38s. We got to fly in big C-130s, KC-135s. So we flew really old aircraft to know what flight controls felt like back then. And, honestly, a lot of pilots were male. The majority of pilots were male back then. And it was a very physical job. Like, you didn't have any assist. You didn't have any mechanical or electrical assist in the flight control. So it was really like a physical job. And of course now, it's flying is not dependent on your strength whatsoever, but we flew a lot of older aircraft to find out like what essentially bad flight controls felt like, because they didn't have all the technology that we had. We flew new aircraft. We flew civilian aircraft like Cessnas, aerobatic aircraft like Christian Eagles and Extra 300s. And we even flew the Goodyear blimp, which was really amazing to do that. And so that was an exciting part of my job. But I think for that part, for flight test, the most meaningful part of my job, my favorite part, was that we were keeping warfighters safe. We were testing the aircraft before a second lieutenant would get in them. And, a second lieutenant with the lowest amount of training possible, who's competent to fly the aircraft, but doesn't have the experience. We were making sure that we found any problems in the software, any problems in the hardware, anything, if it was supposed to have a certain range or distance the aircraft could go, or carry so many weapons and it couldn't do that, or the weapons weren't accurate enough, things like that, we would find that and report that. So I think that was the best part of that job. And also testing the ejection seats at Holloman. We knew that if we made the ejection seat safe, that in an emergency, if an airman, had to eject, that we did everything we could to make them come home alive through a safe parachute and ejection. The hardest part. Honestly, I think maybe the hardest part was getting my undergraduate, and then my graduate degrees, because I'm much more of an applied person. I do much better when I'm applying what I've learned. And I love studying. I actually really enjoyed being a student. But I think it's a really good reflective question. The hardest part may have been just getting that undergraduate degree in aeronautical engineering. I also minored in German, and I was at the Air Force Academy. So we had a ton of, as you can imagine, extracurricular military and academic and athletic activities, lots of leadership that we had to do, which I enjoyed. But it was, I didn't sleep a lot. I had some very late nights, but I loved it. I mean, hard, but rewarding. And then I also got a master's while I was young lieutenant single at Eglin Air Force Base. I did that in my spare time. And then I got a PhD in my 40s when I was in the Air Force, and I was a mom of they were little. In 2011, let's see, they would have been like 6 and 4. So mom of two little kids, getting a PhD, and it was hard, but so worth it, like so rewarding. Ooh, that is an excellent question. Well, when I was at the academy teaching, I never wanted to get a PhD, like never was that on my list of goals or things I thought I'd want. But when I was at the academy teaching, I was a lieutenant colonel. this would have been 2009 to 2011. It was my favorite job, teaching cadets, teaching, 17 to 22-year-olds, essentially, Sarah's age and a little older. And I just got so much energy from it. I just felt like it was the job where I felt like I made the most difference, on a personal level, because you're getting to teach people. And I learned as much from them, from these young men and women, as, they learned from me. In fact, I probably learned more, because they're just such inspiring people. And I learned, I learned how, to help them. It was rewarding, to help them get the career field they wanted. It was rewarding to help them get into graduate school. It was rewarding to help them pass a PT test, a physical training test, if they, needed to do a pull-up or get a faster time on a run. Or it was just rewarding to help them discover what they might, want to be able to do. And then now, the first class I taught there would have been the class of 2010 and 2011. Now those folks have been in the Air Force for 10, 11 years. And the most rewarding part now is getting emails or phone calls or texts from them saying, "Hey, Colonel S, I'm getting married," or "Hey, Colonel S, I just became an instructor pilot," or, I'm having a baby, or, I got into test pilot school. So, it's just the most rewarding thing working with young people like you all. Well, you know what? I think we did good. I think we just answered 2 questions in one. Why'd I get my PhD and rewarding? So to wrap those 2 together, that's what was most rewarding, okay, working with the young cadets. And why did I get my PhD was because I wanted to keep doing it. And I said to my boss, Colonel Neil Barlow at the time, I said, I don't want to just do this for 2 years or 3 years and then move, which is what typically happens. How can I stay here? And he's like, "Well, Angie, the only way you can, stay here is to go and get your PhD and come back." And I was like, okay, then that's what I want to do. If I get to stay here and do this rewarding job, that's what I want to do. And so it was fantastic. And I did get my PhD and I did get to come back. What are some of the challenges I faced? I think early on, one of the challenges I faced is that it was definitely a male dominated career field, but I have to admit, I always had the best experiences. I think God really blessed me. My classmates at the academy are like, brothers and sisters to me. When I was a young engineer, almost without question did I have amazing bosses. I very rarely had a female boss. I think I had a female boss once in 19 years, which is kind of crazy. I was sorry, in 28 years, I had a female boss once. But I had amazing mentors, male and female mentors, but most of my bosses were male and they were wonderful. I think really the only challenge was just being the minority, right? Like, at the academy, women, when I went through, only made up 10% of the class. So 1 out of every 10 person was a lady, but the ladies, those 100 ladies from my class are like some of my best friends still to this day. They were in my wedding. I was in their wedding. They're godmother to one of my sons, things like that. But maybe the hardest part was just, being different, like being in the minority, which people face all the time. And the same thing for my, career, the rest of my career, there weren't many women. And so sometimes that's hard, but I feel blessed because the men that I worked with and for, and the men that worked for me, like I consider all of them very good friends, and like brothers to me. I'm trying to think other hard parts. Oh, and I guess to conclude on that is now at the Air Force Academy, the incoming class had 29 or 30% women. So look at that, like just in 30 years, 30 years plus, there's now 3 times as many women at service academies, right? And I don't know the stats, but many more women, across, the United States in STEM career fields now, right? Not just the Air Force. But so I think even if it was hard, it was worth it. Let's see, to be a good aeronautical engineer, I'd say that, you have to love what you do. And that's probably true whether, you want to be a nurse or a doctor, or a teacher or an electrician, um, no matter what you want to do, I think you have to love it. You have to have a passion for it. And I don't think that's specific to being an aeronautical engineer. Um, Engineering in general, you got to be good at math, and you got to want to maybe build things with your hands, or nowadays, build things, on a computer, um, with SolidWorks or things like that. But honestly, I'll just answer it generically. Whatever it is that you ladies and young men, want to do, just make sure you have a passion for it. If it's something that you're excited about, that makes you want to get up every day and drive into work, believe in the mission of the organization you work for, which for me was the United States military, protecting freedom for America and for our allies all across the world. If you believe in that mission, then no matter what your job is in that organization, you're going to love it. So just have a passion for it. If you can ever find a job that you love because you have a passion for it, it doesn't feel like work. That's a very good question. I think being in the military in general is tough on families because you move every couple years. Sometimes you move every year, depending on what your mom or dad's job is. My husband Fabrice and I got married later in life. I was 34 and he was 41 when we got married. We met 18 months before that, but so we were older. So it was, maybe a little easier in that respect. But still, our sons moved a lot. They were born in Washington, D.C., and then we moved to Alamogordo, New Mexico, and then we moved to the academy. And then we moved to Ohio, then we moved back to the academy, then we moved to Edwards Air Force Base, California, and then we moved here. So, 7 moves until they were 7 moves by the time the eldest Joseph started in 9th grade and the youngest in 7th grade. That's a lot. Now, I have friends that in that same time span had twice as many moves, right? So it could be a move a year, in some cases. So I think that's hard. I think it does make kids more resilient, but I think, it allows them to make new friends and things like that. But at some point, they want to stay, you want to stay with your friends that you've made and have a foundation, grow roots in this community that you're in. And so that's why I decided to retire. My husband and I thought that would be a good idea to retire when our eldest son, Joseph, was going into 9th grade. So we retired in 2019 from Edwards Air Force Base, California, moved here back to Colorado Springs, where we'd had a house and lived before. And that way Joseph could go through high school all in 4 years in the same place. Mark could go from 7th grade on, like your age, Aubrey, 7th grade on. And the best part is the eldest one, Jojo, actually went to kindergarten here with these same kids. So even though we went away for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade to Ohio, then we came back here for 4th and 5th grade. And then, no, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then we went to California for 7th and 8th grade. When he came back, he plugged right back into his same group of friends. And so for a military kid, that's pretty cool. And even Mark, it was, some of the kids that he'd gone to preschool with, he's able to continue with, but also, those that he went to, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade with. So that's the hardest part. And I think also on my husband, Fabrice, because every time we moved, he couldn't keep the same job that he had. Every military spouse, when you pick up and move, you have to recreate yourself professionally. And it's a big gift, a sacrifice that your military spouse gives you as the military member to pick up and, start all over again. Ooh, I like that question. How does my career affect my faith life? Well, first of all, I want to attribute a lot of my faith life, like my foundation, to my parents. They did a great job raising me, my brother and sister Catholic. So I appreciate that very much. That was a gift. And then secondly, I went to the Air Force Academy where there was a very, very strong faith life across different denominations. The Catholic youth group that we had there was amazing. I grew in my faith from the time I was 17 to 21 being in college because, well, the academy is hard. And so we actually had the opportunity to go to daily mass in the morning before class. And so I tried to do that many days during the week. Now, to be fair, one of the reasons we went to mass, because I have to be honest here, is that otherwise we had to stand out in the hallway and call minutes, which sound funny, but we would be dressed in our uniforms and we'd say, sir, ma'am, there are, 15 minutes before accountability formation for the breakfast, like when we were about to march, or before lunch, sir, ma'am, there are 12 minutes before accountability formation, before noon meal formation. And we'd say what the uniform of the day was in the morning and what the menu for breakfast and lunch was and all that kind of stuff. And so frankly, I was like, well, I could go to church and spend time with God and my family, or my friends who are my family, or I could stand in the hallway, right, at attention, right? So to be fair, part of it was that, but we had a wonderful group called Tech, Teens Encounter Christ, and went on retreats. We had, when we were seniors, we got to lead those retreats. We were called Wheaties. And we had a wonderful job, just hanging out together and being good friends. So my faith life grew a lot. I do. First of all, and this is advice for boys and girls, but don't ever think there's anything you can't do. If you want to do something, even if it seems like a crazy goal, you can do it. You can do it. Don't let anybody tell you no. I have had people in my lifetime, make me feel like I wasn't good enough, or make me feel like I wasn't smart enough, or, things like that. And you just have to discount those people. You just have to be like, well, I don't respect their opinion, and I'm going to do, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to follow my dreams and follow my goals. And once you know what you want to do, which is a big step to get there, you seek out mentors, right? You seek out adults that are already in that career field. But I would seek out folks at different levels, young ones that are in college studying what you want to, do. Maybe folks in their 20s or 30s who just got their first or second, job. And then someone in their 40s or 50s who has their dream job and is very accomplished and is in charge of, programs or a company, that you would like to work for. And you know what you'll find out when you reach out to people like that at any level, young or old, they're going to be so excited to talk to you, because especially me, I'm 51. I didn't have a lot of women role models. Now I had in engineering. Now I had a bunch of wonderful women role models. My mom, my aunts. I had lots of moms of my friends and things like that. But I just didn't have a lot of women in my career field. And I think you too will have that, or all of you out there who get to see this, you will have many more women role models. But seek out male role models too, because everything has evolved so much now. There's so much encouragement for men and women alike, or from men and women alike, for girls to do STEM. I mean, my best role models in my life have been men. And I think sometimes they get a bum rap. I've gotten to many places in my career because of amazing, males that have supported me. But seek out advice. And then if there's something that you're not sure and you're like, I really like to do this, but I don't think I have the skill, try it, because you might like it. Now, and this is a crazy example, but I've heard some people say, hey, I want to get a pilot's license, or I want to skydive, but I don't think I can do it. And try it. You might be fantastic at it, right? You might, and when you try something new and you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you might just find out that you're good at something, right? Maybe for a hobby, or maybe for a career field. For me, getting out of my comfort zone was doing that PhD. I'll be honest with you, Aubrey and Sarah, I was like, I'm 41, which isn't old at all. I think it's very young now that I'm 51, but I had two little kids and I was like, I'm a mom. And now thankfully the Air Force paid me, paid for the scholarship and paid me my salary to do it full time. So if you're ever going to get a PhD, have somebody, do it for you that way where they're sponsoring you, because I was a full-time PhD student. I wasn't working and doing that, but I'll be honest, I was very intimidated. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like when I thought of people with PhDs, I thought of, my professors, my, mentors that I had when I was younger or even when I was older. I was like, that's not me. I'm not in their league. But I went and did it and I had faith. I had faith, I relied on Jesus too. And I was like, okay, Jesus, if this is where you want me to go, then, help me, and I also think he wouldn't have put it on my heart, to go get the PhD or presented that opportunity if he didn't know that I could do it. Right. So that would be my biggest thing is, take a leap of faith, believe that you can. Don't let anybody tell you no, because you will have people tell you no, whether you're girls or boys. Somebody will tell you, oh, that's too hard, or you can't do that, or whatever. And just be like, I'm not listening to them if that's what you want. And then second of all, seek mentors. You will make the best relationships and friendships by seeking out mentors. And frankly, you're honoring those people. They want to meet you as much as you want to meet them.